Well, hello everybody. In this presentation, I'm going to recap the last few weeks as we begin to transition from really looking at the work that has been done by others, reviewing the literature, examining different approaches to teaching with technology, and really start getting into lessons. First, some that we find, and then others that we begin to create. And I just want to ground us a little bit as we move forward in that area. So if you think back to the first couple of weeks, we really started by talking about technology, and most of you have made this point over the last, maybe the entire class, that technology indeed can help students learn. But again, I think most of you at one point or another made the post or otherwise presented the idea that technology alone is not enough. And certainly these are important kind of fundamentals for us to work from. So as we got into last week, we also started looking at different pedagogies of technology, and some of you pointed at different ways and different approaches in which technology could be used. And I think an important lesson from this is also that there is no single one ideal best way to use technology that's going to solve all of our problems. It's actually much more complex than that. And we need to use technology in lots of different ways, much like we use lots of different ways of instruction in general. Then we also talked a little bit about, and these ideas started coming out from your messages as well, that individualization is really important, and it does require technology and some sort of pedagogy and ways of teaching. And as it relates to that, I want to bring up this idea of making sure that whatever we're doing is relevant for kids. And also we'll begin talking about the quality of the task and the quality of instruction as we move forward. Because of much of the kind of discussion about ideas of individualization, we'll explore that further later in the course as well. So if you have additional thoughts on that, please do share those, because we'll dedicate an entire session later in the semester for individualization. All right, so I want to share a couple of slides about where we're moving towards, given where we've come from. And again, because we're going to start looking at lessons and thinking about our own lessons, I want you to start thinking about that in terms of technology integration. And I want to bring up these kind of two different ways to think about instruction. And typically when we talk about instruction, we talk about the planning part of it, and then we also talk about the enactment or the execution of it. And these different pieces of teaching really are quite different for us as teachers as well, in terms of how we design and plan those things, as well as what we can do just in the moment. So let me try to dig a little bit deeper in this. So when we think about planning a lesson or a unit, we're afforded a bunch of luxuries. The first one is we have some time, and I know we never have enough time, but what I mean by that is we can actually sit down and think and plan. Which is very different than what happens in an actual lesson, because in an actual lesson, a student asks a question, a student has an idea, something happens, we have to react instantly. And when we have to react instantly, we really don't have time to make decisions. Those decisions are in the moment. And I think that's a really important consideration, because when we plan, we do have the opportunity to really think deeply, reflect, come back, change, and do a lot of different things to design our lesson as well as we possibly can to meet the needs of our learners, right? And that's kind of the second piece, which is when we plan a lesson, we know who our students are. They're not going to act and behave the same way every day, but we do have some time to think about them. And we also can consider the learning goal and how all these things kind of connect. Again, in the moment, we have to make instant decisions. And one of the things that happens with instant decisions is it's not that they're not always right, but a lot of times we have to weigh pros and cons. In other words, if I remove a disruptive student from my classroom, in a way I've dealt with one issue, which is the student may have been disrupting the learning in the class, but I've also now denied that student the opportunity to learn in that class by removing them from that classroom. So these are much more kind of challenging decisions that we have to do in the moment. So why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because lesson plans and planning tasks and unit plans are super, super important. And I've got to tell you, I've seen enough lessons, I've taught enough lessons that I know that if my lesson is really, really well planned and well designed, that lesson is probably going to go pretty well. But if I didn't spend as much time or given as much thought into the lesson that I'm going to teach, inevitably it ends up not going really well. So this week, as you start looking at some lessons and what those afford, and also we're going to start talking about how we see technology in these lessons, really start paying attention to lesson planning and design, because that's going to be a central piece of everything else we do through this course. All right, so how should we plan with technology? And again, we start with the premise that our goal is student learning. And then we need to ask ourselves how we can support that as teachers. So we know that technology can help individualize, visualize, create access, promote collaboration, and much, much more. And again, you have brought up lots and different ways, but I want you to start thinking not just of these things kind of in isolation or more kind of these high up ideas of engaging or motivating kids, but really start thinking about when we integrate technology into a lesson plan or when we look at a lesson plan, what does that tell us about what kids can actually learn? And when we consider who our students are, right, and where they come from and what they already know, how does that all fit in or not fit in? And I don't expect you to be able to answer that question, but over the next probably good solid couple of months, we're really going to be focusing more on this. So I hope this gets you thinking a little bit as we shift from kind of learning a lot in terms of what we know and don't know, and start getting more into the practical components of what it is that we can do to actually help our kids. Have a good week. And as always, if you have any questions, do let me know.